father in prison for 8 years, a single mother who could barely afford food, called too skinny to play. This is the story of a boy who had every reason to fail, but refused to. That boy is João Pedro. And now, he's not just surviving, he's about to take the Premier League by storm. But how has what he's gone through shaped him for glory? Well, let's talk about that. João Pedro has barely settled at Chelsea, but it already feels like he belongs here. From the very first whistle, you could tell this isn't just another signing. His movement, his confidence, his sharpness in front of goal, it's all there. But what made people take notice? 3 games. 3 goals, that's not luck. That's a player showing up on the world stage like he's been there his whole life. And it's not just the numbers. If you watched him play, you'd see it. The way he drifts into space, the one-touch passes, his composure. In the final, every moment he made was calculated. Every touch had a purpose. He didn't look like a new signing trying to impress. He looked like a leader in attack. Watching him, you can't help but think, this is what Manchester United fans think Xerxes is. That elegance, that ability to make play look so easy, so clean. João Pedro is the blueprint. Even his goals, they aren't scrappy finishes. They're class in the way he places the ball, the confidence in his strike. It feels like he's been doing this for years, like this level is normal for him. But if you really know his story, you'll understand why. This is not the first time João Pedro has performed under pressure. Because before Chelsea, before Watford, before Brighton, his first big stage wasn't a stadium, it was a prison. It was inside a Brazilian prison. Cameras captured a small, hopeful boy hugging his father, a man named João, who had just been released after spending 8 years behind bars. João wasn't just any man. He was once seen as a gifted footballer, someone destined to make a name for himself. Those who watched him play believed he had what it took: the skill, the vision, the flair. But life in Brazil, especially in the margins of society, doesn't always reward talent. Along the way, João lost his path. He was convicted and imprisoned for his alleged involvement in a murder, a sentence that tore him away from the world and from his family. By the time he stepped out of prison at 31, his football dreams were long gone. Yet, as part of a Brazilian TV report covering his release, there was a brief but emotional moment that told a much deeper story. The cameras caught João Pedro embracing his father and saying, "I've always wanted to be on the pitch with my dad. I'm going to achieve that. My sister always wanted to play with him, and so did I. But we couldn't because he was in prison." That wasn't just a child's wish, it was a declaration, a promise that would continue where his father left off, that he would bring the family name back onto the pitch, but this time on his own terms. But, you see, dreams like that don't come easy when you're growing up poor, without a father figure, and with a mother fighting just to keep you fed. João Pedro's childhood was marked by scarcity, by struggle, and by the weight of a dream too heavy for most kids to carry. And yet, even then, he made a choice to start playing in his father's favorite position, defensive midfield. That was his first step. But life wasn't about to make it easy for him. You see, João Pedro's life was never designed for comfort. Growing up without a father at home, in a household where even a single meal a day wasn't guaranteed, that's a burden most people can't imagine. But his mother, she carried that burden quietly, sacrificing everything just to give João a fighting chance. When Pedro started chasing football seriously, his mother was right there, supporting him with what little she had. Sometimes that meant giving up her own meal so that João had the strength to train the next day. She knew he needed energy, he needed focus, and if that meant she went hungry, so be it. That's the kind of sacrifice that doesn't show up in stats or headlines, but it built the foundation for everything Pedro would later become. At just 10 years old, João wasn't just playing football. He understood that his family's survival could one day depend on his success, and that weight, instead of crushing him, it drove him. He trained like there was no tomorrow, like football was his only way out, because it was. Eventually, that determination led them to Rio de Janeiro. It wasn't an easy move. They didn't have much, but his mother believed that if João was ever going to make it, it had to be there. That's where they crossed paths with Luis Felipe, a scout for Fluminense's under-11s. Felipe spotted João Pedro at a local tournament in Sao Paulo. He saw something in the boy, raw talent, hunger, potential, and convinced the family to move to Rio, hoping Fluminense would be the place to shape him. But even after getting into the academy, life didn't suddenly get better. Poverty still followed them. The city was different, the streets tougher, and food was still a daily question mark. João Pedro was still a skinny kid with a big dream, and in places like Fluminense, that wasn't always enough. Yet, no matter how hard things got, his mother never stopped believing. She was his anchor. Every time he thought about quitting, she reminded him that one day it would all work out. But even with his mother's strength behind him, João still had one major obstacle: his body. He was thin, underfed, and not built like the other kids, and that was about to test him all over again. At Fluminense, it didn't take long for the coaches to notice João Pedro's ability, his intelligence, his touch, his awareness on the ball. But there was one problem they just couldn't ignore: his frame. He was too skinny. In a country where raw talent is everywhere, physicality still matters, and João didn't have it. The truth is, it wasn't his fault. Growing up poor, often skipping meals, he didn't have the luxury of nutrition or gym sessions to build his body. Years of scarcity left him smaller and weaker than his peers, and that started to show, especially as he progressed to the under-15s and under-16s. Coaches started benching him. Sometimes he wasn't even included in the squad lists. Imagine that. Knowing you're technically gifted, but watching games from the sidelines because your body doesn't match your talent. Most kids would have folded under that frustration, but not João Pedro. He took every snub personally, but he didn't let it break him. And through it all, his mother was still in his ear, still telling him, "It's going to work. Don't be scared. Your time will come." The club must have seen that spark too, because they weren't ready to give up on him. If the defensive midfield role was too demanding physically, maybe another position could unlock him. That's when they made the decision: shift him forward, let him play as an attacking midfielder where his speed of thought and technical ability could shine. And that changed everything. Suddenly, his slim frame wasn't a disadvantage, it was an advantage. He could move quicker, think faster, and manipulate the ball better than others. Within months, he was pushed even further up the pitch, from midfield to striker, and that was the moment everything clicked. The skinny kid that nobody thought would survive the physical game, he was now the sharpest forward on the field. But João Pedro's transformation wasn't just about position, it was also about proving he could rise when it mattered most. And soon enough, he'd have the chance to prove it, because his professional debut was coming. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, hit the subscribe button. When João Pedro finally made his professional debut for Fluminense, it wasn't just a milestone, it was a statement. After everything, the hunger, the rejection, the doubts, he had made it onto the pitch wearing the senior shirt of one of Brazil's biggest clubs. And he didn't waste time showing why he belonged. He wasn't the strongest, but you couldn't knock him off the ball. He wasn't the fastest, but his movement was always one step ahead. Every time he touched the ball, it was like he was seeing the game in slow motion. Quick passes, clever positioning, and the calmness in front of goal that you just can't teach. In his first few games, he wasn't just blending in, he was standing out. Fluminense fans quickly noticed here was a teenager, playing with the maturity of a seasoned striker. The same kid who was too skinny a few years earlier was now scoring goals and making it look easy. And that caught the attention of scouts, not just in Brazil, but abroad. Because in 2019, there was already a club knocking. Watford, the English side. They saw his potential and signed him, banking on that raw Brazilian flair to grow in Europe. For João, moving to Watford wasn't just a transfer, it was his first time stepping into European football. Faster, tougher, more ruthless. But he embraced it. And even though Watford wasn't the biggest club, it became his proving ground. But that wasn't where the story peaked, because soon after Watford, another chapter was waiting, one that would take him to the south coast of England, where his game would evolve even further. Brighton was next. At Brighton, João Pedro didn't just play, he evolved. This was the club known for transforming rough diamonds into polished talents, and Pedro was no exception. Under Roberto De Zerbi, Brighton played a system that demanded intelligence, quick decision-making, and fluid movement. All the things that João Pedro was already good at, but here, he sharpened them. At Brighton, he wasn't just learning to score, he was learning how to read the game at a higher level. He studied players like Danny Welbeck, a veteran forward whose experience in the Premier League and on the international stage became a silent blueprint for Pedro. Welbeck's off-ball movement, his link-up play, his timing, João absorbed all of it. But the most important thing Brighton gave him was trust. They didn't try to make him someone else, they gave him the freedom to use his touch, his vision, his creativity. In return, Pedro delivered goals, assists, and performances that made bigger clubs watch closely. You could see the difference in his game: sharper touches, more decisive movements, and a growing confidence. He was no longer the skinny kid trying to prove he belonged. He was now a complete forward, one who could lead the line, drop deep to create, and finish under pressure. And that's when Chelsea came calling. The big step up, a club where pressure is permanent and expectations are sky high. But for João Pedro, pressure is a familiar territory. And at Chelsea, he's already proving that this is where he belongs. But after this Club World Cup performance, the only question on everyone's mind is, can he become the next big thing? Well, I'll leave that to be answered by you. Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Also, check out our last Chelsea video. Thank you.